Brian Pillman's widow thought the company would honor him. Instead, she got silence and a cold dose of reality.
You know, I knew it was just a matter of time before it happened to someone, and fortunately it was my husband.
Andrew Martin's death was treated like a dirty secret they wanted buried. And Dino Bravo? No acknowledgement, no tribute, nothing. These are wrestlers' deaths the WWE chose to ignore. Crash Holly. The wrestling world has always celebrated champions, but WWE's treatment of Michael John Lockwood proved that even holding a title 22 times can't guarantee you'll be remembered when you die. Lockwood, known to fans as Crash Holly, died on November 6, 2003, at just 32 years old, from a prescription drug overdose that was ruled suicide. The man who entertained millions with his delusional super heavyweight persona, despite weighing barely 200 pounds, was found at fellow wrestler Stevie Richards' home surrounded by empty pill bottles, having consumed 90 pills of carisoprodol. His personal world had completely collapsed. Divorce papers from his wife, a WWE release earlier that year, and the crushing reality that the business he loved had moved on without him. WWE's response was corporate cruelty disguised as professionalism. The company refused to air any significant tribute on television. No 10-bell salute, no roster walkout, nothing that would typically honor a fallen performer. Instead, they threw him into a generic December 2003 Raw memorial segment, lumping him in with other deaths without any individual recognition. Their only other acknowledgement came nearly 2 years later during ECW One Night Stand 2005, where he was briefly mentioned in a throwaway video package about deceased wrestlers. Shane Douglas, who witnessed Lockwood's final weeks in TNA, captured the man's genuine passion for wrestling.
Just, real exuberant guy, and I think he was the type of guy, because of his size, and before they created the Crash Holly and then all these subsequent takes on it, he seemed very appreciative. Like he loved being in the business.
Despite holding the WWF Hardcore Championship 22 times and being genuinely beloved by fans, WWE's shameful neglect stemmed from Lockwood's mid-card status and the controversial nature of his death. A suicide by drug overdose was simply too messy for a company desperately trying to rehabilitate its image during a period of intense scrutiny over wrestler mortality. While WWE's silence on Crash Holly was shameful, the next case reveals how they handled an even more damaging revelation: brain trauma evidence they desperately wanted buried. Test. Standing 6'6" inches with movie star looks and legitimate athletic credentials, Andrew Martin represented everything WWE claimed to value in a superstar, yet when death claimed him, at just 33 years old, the company treated him like a dirty secret they wanted buried. Martin died on March 13, 2009, from an accidental oxycodone overdose in his Tampa condominium, but the real bombshell came when a posthumous examination revealed his brain showed severe CTE damage, resembling that of an Alzheimer's patient twice his age, making him only the second wrestler after Chris Benoit to receive this devastating diagnosis. This was exactly the kind of story WWE desperately wanted to avoid: a former champion whose brain had been destroyed by the very entertainment they peddled to families. WWE's response was a masterclass in corporate cowardice. The company completely refused to acknowledge Martin's death on television, implementing what can only be described as a total media blackout. Wrestling fans explicitly called out that the WWE doesn't acknowledge his death on TV, highlighting the deliberate nature of this erasure. No tribute, no graphic, no mention whatsoever. Complete radio silence for a man who held the Intercontinental, European, Hardcore, and Tag Team Championships. Martin's final interview, filmed shortly before his death, revealed a broken man who had lost all faith in the industry.
People ask me how get into wrestling. I said, go back to school, man. Because you know what? You're not going to make any money now. It's very political. You're a puppet. Oh, that's all you are.
His prescient observations about wrestling's mortality crisis proved tragically prophetic.
It's horrible. It's been the worst year of my life. Without question. I've just turned 32 years old and I went to 8 funerals this year.
The timing during Linda McMahon's 2010 Senate campaign made WWE's silence even more calculated as they faced intense scrutiny over wrestler deaths and drug issues. Martin's CTE diagnosis, combined with his drug-related death, represented exactly the kind of liability WWE wanted to disappear from public consciousness. If you think complete silence was WWE's worst response to a wrestler's death, wait until you see what they did to the next wrestler's grieving widow. Brian Pillman. When Brian Pillman died, WWE didn't just ignore his death, they transformed it into one of the most grotesque displays of exploitation in wrestling history, proving that sometimes acknowledgement can be far worse than silence. Pillman died on October 5, 1997, at age 35, from a heart attack in his Bloomington, Minnesota hotel room, hours before he was scheduled to compete at In Your House Bad Blood. The official cause was atherosclerotic heart disease, the same condition that killed his father, with cocaine found in his system as a contributing factor. Rather than offer a respectful tribute to a man who had helped define the Attitude Era, WWE chose to exploit his widow's grief for ratings. The night after Pillman's death on October 6, 1997, Vince McMahon conducted a live interview on Raw with Pillman's widow Melanie, just 24 hours after she learned of her husband's passing. The interview was widely criticized as tasteless, awkward, and bizarre, focusing on Pillman's drug use and personal struggles rather than honoring his legacy. This wasn't journalism, it was voyeuristic entertainment that fed off human suffering. McMahon's questions were invasive and inappropriate for a grieving widow.
There was some speculation last night when we spoke. Brian, because of his injuries, has had to take a great deal of prescribed medicine. There was some speculation that he may have taken too much. If in fact that is proven to be the case, which it is yet to be, is there anything that you would want to say to aspiring athletes who do get hurt and have to resort to prescribed medication, painkillers?
Melanie's heartbreaking response inadvertently exposed the wrestling industry's systemic problems.
I think all athletes, to a degree, experience a reliance on pain medicine, and I knew it was just a matter of time before it happened to someone, and fortunately, it was my husband.
This grotesque handling is often cited as the reason WWE adopted a less is more approach to acknowledging wrestler deaths in subsequent years. The company's decision to exploit Melanie's grief for ratings during the Attitude Era was seen as prioritizing shock value over human decency, establishing a template for how not to handle tragedy that would influence their future silence on other deaths. WWE's exploitation of Brian Pillman was disgusting, but their treatment of the next wrestler proved that prejudice could make their cruelty even more personal. Chris Kanyon. The entertainment industry has always struggled with diversity, but WWE's treatment of Chris Kanyon's death revealed how their prejudices extended even beyond the grave. Christopher Kluxaritz died on April 2, 2010, at age 40, by suicide via antidepressant overdose in his childhood home in Queens, New York, with an empty bottle of Seroquel found near his body alongside a suicide note addressed to his family. Kanyon had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2004 and had publicly threatened suicide in the weeks leading to his death, struggling with both mental illness and the wrestling industry's toxic culture toward LGBTQ+ performers. WWE's acknowledgement was deliberately minimal and calculated to minimize his significance. The company issued only a brief 2-sentence press release on its website, providing no tribute, video package, or on-air recognition, a stark contrast to the elaborate memorials given to wrestlers who died under less controversial circumstances. This wasn't oversight. This was punishment for daring to challenge WWE's conservative culture and legal authority. Kanyon's problems with WWE began after he came out as gay in 2001 and pitched a storyline to Vince McMahon about wrestling as an openly gay competitor while maintaining a serious persona. Instead, McMahon booked him in a humiliating 2003 SmackDown segment where Kanyon, dressed as Boy George, was attacked by The Undertaker with deliberately stiff chair shots, a segment widely perceived as punishment for his sexuality. His relationship with WWE further deteriorated when he joined a 2006 lawsuit with Raven and Michael Sanders, arguing that wrestlers were misclassified as independent contractors rather than employees. Ellis Jones, a close friend, revealed the depth of Kanyon's struggles with industry prejudice. WWE's minimal response reflected their desire to distance themselves from Kanyon's controversial exit, legal actions, and the sensitive nature of his mental health struggles, proving that even in death, being different made you unworthy of their respect. At least Chris Kanyon received a website statement from WWE. The next wrestler didn't even get that basic courtesy. Ludwig Borga. Professional wrestling has produced its share of controversial characters, but WWE's complete silence regarding Tony Halm's death demonstrated their willingness to erase even their own history when it becomes inconvenient. Halm, who performed as Ludwig Borga, died on January 8, 2010, at age 47, by suicide via self-inflicted gunshot wound in Helsinki, Finland. His death came just 2 days after his 47th birthday, marking the end of a life that had spiraled into addiction, legal troubles, and mental health crises following his brief but memorable WWE tenure. WWE's response was complete radio silence. No website acknowledgement, no press release, no mention on any WWE programming. The company did not acknowledge Halm's death in any significant way, implementing what amounted to a total media blackout. This wasn't merely neglect. This was calculated erasure of a performer whose post-wrestling life had become an embarrassment the company wanted forgotten. Halm's WWE tenure as Ludwig Borga was brief but impactful, running from 1993 to 1994, where he notably ended Tatanka's undefeated streak and defeated Marty Jannetty at SummerSlam. However, he was widely disliked backstage, described by Jim Ross as obnoxious and a bully with issues, and his neo-Nazi tattoo and aggressive behavior alienated colleagues. His post-wrestling career included boxing, MMA, and politics in Finland, serving in Parliament from 2003 to 2007, but was marred by scandals including calling Finland's president a lesbian, hiding illegal steroids, and a 2006 DUI conviction. WWE's decision to ignore Halm's death aligned with their pattern of selectively honoring wrestlers based on their relationship with the company and public image. Halm's lack of lasting impact, toxic reputation, and controversial post-wrestling career made him an ideal candidate for corporate amnesia. While Ludwig Borga was completely erased from WWE's memory, the next case shows how public pressure could force the company into reluctant acknowledgement. Viscera. Sometimes WWE's cruelty isn't found in complete silence, but in their grudging, minimal acknowledgments that feel more insulting than ignoring someone entirely. Nelson Frazier Jr., known throughout his career as Mabel Viscera and Big Daddy Feeve, died on February 18, 2014, at age 43, from a heart attack in Memphis, Tennessee. The cause was complications from morbid obesity and type 2 diabetes-related heart damage, with traces of drugs and alcohol found in his bloodstream. WWE's initial response was complete silence, leading to public outcry from Frazier's family. The company did not acknowledge his passing on Raw or other programming immediately following his death, despite Frazier's long history with the company spanning multiple decades and character incarnations. Only after Frazier's widow Cassandra publicly expressed her displeasure did WWE finally air a brief graphic at the start of the February 28, 2014 episode of SmackDown, 2 weeks after his death. No video tribute, no 10-bell salute, no further mention was made on television. The relationship between WWE and Frazier's family had already been strained by legal action. Cassandra Frazier filed a wrongful death lawsuit against WWE, alleging the company withheld information about the dangers of repeated head trauma. The lawsuit was dismissed, with the judge ruling that Frazier's death was not linked to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, but the legal action clearly influenced WWE's reluctance to honor him. While Frazier had a long tenure with WWE wrestling under various gimmicks, he was never positioned as a top-tier star, despite accomplishments including winning the 1995 King of the Ring and holding championships. His release in 2008 and the sensitive nature of his death, linked to obesity and substance use, made WWE hesitant to draw attention to issues that could reflect poorly on the wrestling industry's physical toll. Even delayed recognition was more than the next wrestler received, despite his wrestling family pedigree and respected career. Chris Candido. Wrestling has always prided itself on honoring family legacies and respecting those who paid their dues across multiple promotions, but WWE's treatment of Chris Candido's death showed how corporate loyalties trumped industry respect. Candido died on April 28, 2005 at age 33 due to complications following surgery for a broken tibia and fibula sustained during a tag team match at TNA's Lockdown pay-per-view. Initially diagnosed with pneumonia after collapsing, he passed away shortly after his lungs were drained, with the official cause being a blood clot from surgical complications. WWE's acknowledgement was virtually non-existent, reflecting their pattern of ignoring wrestlers who worked for competitors at the time of their death. The company did not air a tribute, video package, or mention Candido's passing on television, despite his successful run as Skip with the Body Donnas and his broader respect within the wrestling community. Their response was limited to minimal coverage on their website, if any, treating a respected veteran like an afterthought. Candido's most notable WWE run was from 1995 to 1996 as part of the Body Donnas, a mid-card act where his valet Sonny became a major star, while Candido himself was not positioned as top talent. WWE's neglect stemmed from his limited tenure, his association with the controversial Tammy Sonny Sitch, and most importantly, his employment with rival promotion TNA at the time of his death. TNA, in contrast, honored Candido with the Chris Candido Memorial Tag Team Tournament in August 2005, highlighting the respect he commanded outside WWE's corporate walls. The irony was that Candido had shown signs of career resurgence after overcoming personal struggles with drug addiction, making his sudden death from routine surgical complications all the more tragic. WWE's corporate calculation prioritized distancing themselves from a competitor's talent over recognizing a fellow wrestler's contributions to the industry. Corporate loyalty meant nothing when it came to the next wrestler, whose death became a political liability during a crucial campaign. Lance Cade. The cruelest aspect of corporate indifference often lies not in what companies do, but in what they refuse to acknowledge, and WWE's handling of Lance Cade's death exemplified this calculated cruelty. Lance McNaught died on August 13, 2010 at age 29. From heart failure officially attributed to mixed drug intoxication, complicating a cardiomyopathy. An autopsy revealed his death was accidental, caused by prescription drugs that exacerbated an underlying heart condition, continuing a pattern of young wrestlers dying from the pharmaceutical dependencies that wrestling's culture had normalized. WWE's response was corporate damage control disguised as sympathy. The company issued a brief press release on its website, but refused to feature a televised tribute or video package, treating a former three-time World Tag Team Champion like a minor footnote in their history. What made this particularly callous was the timing. Linda McMahon was running for U.S. Senate in 2010, and when asked about Cade's death, she claimed she might have met him once, a dismissive response designed to distance her campaign from WWE's controversial history with wrestler mortality. Cade's problems began with a 2008 airplane seizure linked to prescription drug abuse, leading to his WWE release after what Jim Ross described as a major league mistake. Despite being trained by Shawn Michaels and showing promise as both a tag team wrestler with Trevor Murdoch and as a singles competitor aligned with Chris Jericho, his mid-card status and drug-related issues made him expendable in WWE's eyes. Trevor Murdoch, Cade's tag team partner and best friend, captured the personal devastation. A Lance Cade tribute show was organized independently by the Texas Wrestling Academy in 2011, highlighting the respect Cade commanded outside WWE's corporate structure and emphasizing the company's deliberate choice to ignore one of their own. Political timing influenced WWE's silence on Lance Cade, but the next case involved something far more sinister than drugs or elections. Dino Bravo. When professional wrestlers die in ways that reflect poorly on the industry, WWE typically responds with minimal acknowledgement. But when they die in ways that have nothing to do with wrestling, the company's silence becomes even more telling. Adolfo Bresciano, known as Dino Bravo, was murdered on March 10, 1993, at age 44, shot multiple times in his home in Quebec while watching a hockey game. His death was widely believed to be a mafia-style execution linked to his involvement in illegal cigarette smuggling, leveraging his connection to Montreal crime boss Vic Catroni. WWE's response was complete silence, no tribute, no acknowledgement, no mention of his passing whatsoever. The company implemented a total media blackout regarding Bravo's death, treating the murder of a former champion like it never happened. This wasn't about drug policies or wellness concerns. This was about a performer whose post-wrestling activities had become an embarrassment the company wanted erased from history. Bravo had a successful 20-year wrestling career, winning the WWF World Tag Team Championship with Dominic DeNucci and holding the short-lived WWF Canadian Championship. However, after being released by WWE in 1991, he struggled to find wrestling work due to his physical decline and turned to organized crime to maintain his lifestyle. According to Bret Hart, Bravo confided shortly before his death that he felt his days were numbered due to his criminal activities. WWE's silence was consistent with their approach to wrestlers whose deaths involved scandal or occurred outside their active roster. The violent, organized crime nature of Bravo's death was completely removed from the wrestling world, making it easy for WWE to pretend he had simply disappeared rather than addressing the uncomfortable reality of how a former star had ended up executed by criminals. A mob execution was shocking enough, but the next wrestler's suicide revealed how WWE abandoned even wrestling royalty. Kerry Von Erich. Wrestling royalty should command respect even in death, but WWE's treatment of Kerry Von Erich proved that family legacy means nothing when corporate image is at stake. Kerry Adkisson died on February 18, 1993, at age 33, by suicide via self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest at his father's ranch in Texas. His death came after years of struggling with chronic pain from a 1986 motorcycle accident that led to foot amputation, painkiller addiction, and mounting legal troubles, including a potential prison sentence for drug-related offenses. WWE's acknowledgement was non-existent, implementing a complete blackout for a wrestler who had held their Intercontinental Championship as the Texas Tornado. At the time of his death in 1993, Kerry was no longer under contract with WWE, having left the company in 1992 to wrestle independently. The company did not publicly acknowledge his death on television or in major publications, likely due to his inactive status and the sensitive nature of suicide compounded by drug-related issues. Chris Adams, who worked closely with Kerry, revealed the personal devastation. Behind his final days, Adams also exposed the complex personal issues Kerry faced. The wrestling industry in the early 1990s was less transparent about such matters, and WWE's focus was on its active roster rather than former performers. While the Von Erich family's legacy was later acknowledged in WWE's 2009 documentary about world-class championship wrestling, this came over a decade after Kerry's death and felt more like historical documentation than genuine tribute. Wrestling dynasty meant nothing to WWE's accountants, just like championship success meant nothing when the next wrestler became a political inconvenience. Umaga. Corporate timing often reveals true priorities, and WWE's handling of Edward Fatu's death demonstrated how political campaigns can influence even basic human decency. Fatu, known as Umaga, died on December 4, 2009, at age 36, after suffering 2 heart attacks and being placed on life support following an acute toxicity incident. The official cause was a combination of hydrocodone, carisoprodol, and diazepam, compounded by pre-existing heart disease and liver failure. WWE's acknowledgement was deliberately minimal and calculated to minimize their association with his death. The company issued a brief website statement emphasizing that Mr. Fatu's contract was terminated on June 11, 2009, a cold reminder designed to distance themselves from any responsibility. WWE did not acknowledge Umaga's death on television, implementing a complete broadcast blackout despite his significant contributions, including 2 Intercontinental Championships and a main event role at WrestleMania 23. The timing was particularly calculated, occurring during Linda McMahon's 2010 Senate campaign when WWE faced intense scrutiny over wrestler deaths and drug issues. Acknowledging Fatu's drug-related death would have drawn unwanted attention to the very issues McMahon was trying to avoid during her political campaign. Tonga Kid, a family member, revealed the futility of trying to help wrestlers with addiction. Fatu had been released by WWE in June 2009 after violating the company's wellness policy for a second time and refusing rehabilitation, making his death exactly the kind of liability WWE wanted to avoid acknowledging during a politically sensitive period. Drug-related deaths during political campaigns were bad enough, but the next wrestler's story shows how talents can be completely ignored at the most critical times. Mike, awesome. Wrestling's most tragic stories often involve performers who had everything: size, athleticism, charisma, yet found themselves broken by an industry that chewed them up and discarded them when convenient. Mike Awesome died on February 17, 2007, at age 42, by suicide via hanging in his Tampa, Florida home. The man, who had been a dominant force in ECW in Japan, was discovered by friends who had come to check on him after he failed to show up for planned activities, marking the end of a life that had spiraled into depression and financial difficulties. WWE's acknowledgement was perfunctory at best, reflecting their discomfort with addressing the uncomfortable realities behind his death. The company issued a brief website statement acknowledging Awesome's passing and noting his time with WWE as part of the WCW-ECW invasion angle, but provided no on-air tribute or meaningful recognition. This minimal response came despite Awesome's legitimate credentials as a former ECW World Heavyweight Champion and his significant international wrestling career. Awesome's WWE tenure from 2001 to 2002 was notably unsuccessful, as his character was given little creative direction and was often portrayed as comedic relief rather than the legitimate threat he had been elsewhere. After leaving WWE, he worked in real estate and wrestled sporadically on independent shows, but reports suggested he struggled with depression, and financial problems that may have contributed to his decision to end his life. Corporal Kirchner, who worked extensively with Awesome in Japan, revealed the devastating personal circumstances that led to his death. The aftermath was equally devastating. WWE's minimal acknowledgement reflected their pattern of avoiding uncomfortable truths about wrestling's toll on performers' mental health. The timing of his death in 2007, shortly after the Chris Benoit tragedy, made WWE particularly sensitive about addressing suicides linked to personal and professional struggles. Domestic destruction was heartbreaking, but have you ever wondered how WWE treats territorial legends when they become inconvenient? Buddy Landel. Regional wrestling stars built the foundation upon which modern sports entertainment stands, but WWE's treatment of Buddy Landel's death demonstrated their willingness to ignore that history when it suits their narrative. William Ensor, known as Nature Boy Buddy Landel, died on June 22, 2015 at age 57 from complications, following a minor car accident in his hometown of Maryville, Tennessee. Landel was involved in a car accident on June 21st, returned home, but began experiencing health issues and was found unresponsive the next day, dying at a local hospital from internal injuries or complications from the crash. WWE's response was typically minimal for a performer they viewed as irrelevant to their modern brand. The company posted a short obituary on their website noting Landel's passing and mentioning his brief time with WWE in the mid-1980s, describing him as a gifted athlete and offering condolences to his family. However, no on-air tribute, video package, or mention on WWE television programming followed, reflecting their pattern of ignoring wrestlers whose primary success came in rival territories. Landel's WWE tenure was brief and unremarkable, lasting less than a year in 1985 to 1986, as a mid-card talent who never achieved significant success. His most notable work was in NWA territories, particularly his Nature Boy gimmick inspired by Ric Flair, which made him a regional star in the South, but meant little to WWE's national audience. The company's focus on its own branded history often marginalizes talents like Landel, whose careers were built in territories that WWE later absorbed but rarely celebrated. In one of his final interviews, Landel discussed the drug culture that plagued wrestling during his era. His honest assessment of the industry's problems continued. By 2015, WWE was focused on its current roster and the growing NXT brand, rarely highlighting deceased wrestlers from rival promotions unless they were Hall of Fame inductees or had significant cultural impact. The wrestling community, including peers and regional promotions, provided more extensive tributes to Landel, emphasizing his charisma and talent, while WWE treated him as a footnote. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.